Bound by Love, Chapter 1, The Storm That Changed Everything. The desert was endless, stretching into the horizon like a golden sea. The sun had long since set, leaving behind a sky painted in deep shades of purple and blue. The stars twinkled above, but Sheikh Hamdan barely noticed them. His mind was clouded, his heart heavy with thoughts he could not escape. His horse moved steadily beneath him, hooves pressing into the soft sand. He had left the palace without a word, needing an escape from the suffocating walls of duty and expectation. There were times when the weight of his title felt unbearable, and tonight was one of those nights. But fate had other plans. The wind began to pick up, howling across the dunes like a warning. Hamdan pulled his cloak tighter around him, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon. The shifting sands told him everything he needed to know. A storm was coming. He had ventured too far from the city, and turning back now was not an option. As the wind roared and the sand whipped violently around him, his horse grew restless. The animal neighed in distress, struggling to find stable footing. Hamdan clenched his jaw, forcing the reins under control. He had faced many storms before, but this one was different. It was relentless, blinding, swallowing the world around him in a thick curtain of dust and wind. Through the chaos, he caught sight of something, a faint flicker of light in the distance. A house. With no other choice, he pushed forward. By the time he reached the small, isolated home, the storm was at its peak. Dismounting his horse, he moved toward the wooden door, lifting his hand to knock. The sound was almost swallowed by the howling wind. After a few moments, the door creaked open. A woman stood before him. She wasn't young, nor was she frail. There was an air of strength about her, a quiet confidence in the way she held herself. Her eyes were sharp, piercing even, as they studied him with an unreadable expression. Unlike most people who recognized him instantly and bowed in reverence, she did not flinch. "You shouldn't be out in a storm like this," she said, her voice calm despite the chaos outside. Hamdan exhaled, pulling down the scarf that covered his face. It wasn't by choice. She observed him for a moment longer, then stepped aside. "Come in." Hamdan hesitated for only a second before stepping inside. The warmth of the home immediately wrapped around him, contrasting with the cold bite of the storm outside. The room was modest but well kept. A small fire burned in the corner, casting flickering shadows across the walls. She moved gracefully, as if completely unaffected by the presence of a stranger in her home. A clay teapot sat on a wooden table, steam rising from it. She poured a cup and handed it to him. "Drink. It will help with the cold." He took it without a word, bringing the cup to his lips. The warmth spread through him instantly, calming his senses. For the first time since entering, he studied her properly. Her face was marked with the passage of time, but it only added to her presence. There was wisdom in her gaze, an unshaken composure that intrigued him. "You live alone?" he asked, his voice steady. "I do," a simple answer. No unnecessary details, no explanation. He leaned back slightly. Most women wouldn't live this far from the city on their own. She met his gaze without hesitation. "I am not most women." A slow smirk tugged at the corner of Hamdan's lips. "I can see that." For a brief moment, silence settled between them. The only sound was the distant howl of the storm outside. Hamdan had always been good at reading people, but this woman, Alina, as he would later learn, was difficult to decipher. She had no fear of him, no interest in impressing him, no curiosity about his status. It was refreshing. "I am Hamdan," he finally said, waiting for the usual reaction. The flicker of recognition, the sudden shift in demeanor, but she only nodded. Alina, no title, no unnecessary pleasantries. Just a name. For the first time in a long while, Sheikh Hamdan felt like more than just a prince, and he liked it. Bound by love, a conversation that changed everything. The storm raged on outside, but inside the small house, there was a strange sense of stillness. Hamdan sat in the wooden chair, cradling the warm cup of tea in his hands. The flames from the lantern flickered, casting a golden glow over the room. It was a modest home, no extravagant decorations, no lavish furnishings, yet it felt Peaceful, Alina moved with quiet grace, gathering a few blankets and setting them near the hearth. She barely acknowledged him as she did so, treating him not as a prince, but as any other weary traveler seeking shelter. He was not used to that. Most people, upon learning who he was, bowed, stammered, or tried to impress him. But she had done none of that. It intrigued him. "You seem comfortable," she remarked, her back still turned to him. Hamdan raised a brow. "Should I not be? You're a prince, aren't you?" she said casually, as if the title meant nothing. Something in his chest tightened. "You knew. I recognized you when you stepped inside." She finally turned to face him, leaning against the wooden table. "But I see no need for formalities here. This house does not care for kings or princes. It shelters only those in need." Hamdan studied her, amusement flickering in his dark eyes. "That is an interesting way to put it. It is the truth," she said simply. "Out there, you are royalty. Here, you are just a man seeking warmth from the storm. Just a man." The words lingered in his mind longer than he expected. "I suppose that is a rare luxury for me," he admitted, leaning back in his chair. Alina watched him for a moment before pouring herself a cup of tea. She sat across from him, the flickering fire between them. "Why were you riding so far from the city?" she asked. "The desert is not a place for aimless wandering." Hamdan exhaled slowly. "Maybe I was looking for something. Did you find it?" He considered her words carefully. What had he been searching for? Freedom? Clarity? An escape from his responsibilities? He wasn't sure. "I don't know," he said honestly. She nodded, as if she understood. Silence settled between them again, but it was not uncomfortable. If anything, Hamdan found it strangely soothing. He had spent his life surrounded by advisors, nobles, and servants, always speaking, always moving, always performing the role of the perfect prince. But here, in this small house with this woman who did not bow to him, there was nothing he needed to prove. "You're different from the women I know," he said suddenly. Studying her, Alina arched a brow. "And what kind of women do you know?" "The kind who are careful with their words. The kind who speak only what they think I want to hear." She smirked slightly. "That must be exhausting. You have no idea." He hadn't meant to say it, but the words slipped out before he could stop them. Perhaps it was the exhaustion from the storm, or perhaps it was the rare sense of peace he felt in her presence. Either way, he did not regret it. Alina took a slow sip of her tea. "You don't belong in a palace, do you?" Hamdan tensed. "What makes you say that?" "I see it in your eyes. You are a man who yearns for something beyond golden walls and royal duties. You wish to be free." His fingers tightened around the cup. How had she seen through him so easily? "I have responsibilities," he said after a moment. "That does not mean you do not dream of more." Hamdan held her gaze. For the first time in his life, someone had put into words the feelings he had never dared to voice, and it unsettled him. Yet, at the same time, he found himself drawn to her even more. Outside, the storm began to calm, but inside, something had already begun. Something he could not ignore. Something that would change everything.